Yahweh, our rock and redeemer, we humbly come before you.
Amen.
As your servants and followers of Yeshua, even amidst the swirling anxieties of this mid-April in 2025, we seek understanding. Our hearts and minds turn to the economic currents around us, specifically these talks of tariffs.
Yes.
Father, grant us wisdom as we delve into these complexities, that we might be wise stewards of what you have provided. Amen.
Amen. It is a time when many feel a sense of unease, as the economic landscape seems to shift beneath our feet.
It really does.
The news echoes with discussions of tariffs, and as those who seek to live according to Yahweh's principles of wisdom and prudence, well, it's natural to consider the implications for our lives and the wider world.
Right.
Our mission today is to explore these potential impacts, drawing insights to help us and you understand what might be unfolding.
Okay, let's unpack this. I'm hearing a very direct question echoing in the hearts of many, likely yours too. How tangibly will these tariffs affect my daily life? There's a real concern about, significant changes to our livelihoods.
Yeah.
It brings to mind the anxieties faced by even the faithful in times of famine or economic hardship throughout Scripture.
That's a deeply valid concern, absolutely. One that resonates with the historical experiences of God's people. Just as Joseph prepared for the famine in Egypt, we seek to understand the potential challenges ahead. Economically speaking, we can anticipate a noticeable increase in the cost of many goods when tariffs, which are essentially taxes on imported goods, are levied.
Right, like an extra cost added on.
Exactly. These added expenses often find their way to the price tags we see in stores, so it's reasonable to expect that your household budget will likely feel the impact in various sectors.
So a general rise in prices then. It makes you think of Proverbs 11.1. A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight.
We hope these economic measures are weighed fairly.
Indeed, we do. Now, our sources highlight the importance of individual circumstances, like a stable income, confidence in one's industry. How do these factors serve as an anchor in potentially turbulent times brought on by tariffs?
That's a key point. Just as a house built on a firm foundation can withstand storms, thinking of Matthew 7,
Brag the wise builder.
a stable financial footing can provide greater resilience. If your work is secure and your industry isn't heavily reliant on goods facing these new tariffs, well, you may be better positioned to navigate potential price increases.
Okay.
However, if your livelihood is more vulnerable, the impact could be more significant. It reminds us that economic shifts, like thin trials in life, often affect individuals and communities differently.
It truly underscores the personal dimension of these big economic events. Now, something that stood out was the mention of panic buying the example of diapers potentially being manufactured in China.
Yeah.
It almost elicits a wry smile, yet reflects a genuine underlying worry. What's the human tendency behind this kind of reaction to potential tariffs and rising costs?
Well, what's fascinating, and perhaps speaks to our inherent desire for security, is this intersection of anticipated scarcity and future cost. When the news suggests that the price of essential items might surge due to tariffs, the instinct to prepare, to ensure our needs are met, can take over. It's a desire to secure provision before things become more expensive or potentially less accessible.
Makes sense, instinctively.
But as we've seen historically, such widespread reactions can unfortunately strain supply chains further and even contribute to the very price increases people fear. It's a delicate balance, between prudent preparation and anxious overreaction.
A bit like the anxieties that can grip us when we lose sight of Yahweh's provision, perhaps.
Exactly.
Now, beyond the direct financial hit, our source mentions the, and I quote, psychological impact of this constant nonsense economic chaos. Can you elaborate on the distinction between the immediate financial effects of tariffs and this broader sense of unease?
That's a crucial distinction. The financial impact is tangible, higher prices, maybe changes in your investment value.
Right, the numbers.
But the psychological impact delves into the realm of uncertainty and instability that tariffs can sow. Businesses find it harder to plan for the future when trade conditions are unpredictable, and the stock market can experience greater volatility, leading to anxiety even for those not directly involved in international trade. This pervasive sense of uncertainty can erode confidence, much like doubt can weaken faith and affect overall economic sentiment.
Like trying to discern the path forward when the clouds are thick. And speaking of clarity, the perception of these tariff policies themselves comes under scrutiny in our material. Strong terms like poorly thought out, market manipulation, even economic sabotage are voiced. How do we, as those seeking truth and understanding, make sense of such strong reactions?
That raises an important question about discerning intentions versus evaluating consequences. Some view tariffs as misguided policies that risk disrupting established global trade, much like actions taken without careful counsel can lead to unforeseen troubles, as Proverbs 15.22 warns.
Good point.
The mention of market manipulation hints at concerns that these announcements might be strategically timed for financial gain by some, and the severe label of economic sabotage suggests a belief that these policies could intentionally harm economic stability.
So quite strong views there.
Very strong. As those who are called to test the spirits, like in 1 John 4.1, it's important to acknowledge these varied and strong perspectives surrounding tariffs.
Indeed, it's a spectrum of interpretations. However, our source also wisely cautions against automatically attributing purely malicious intent. It suggests the reality might be more complex. Can you shed light on that nuance?
Absolutely. While acknowledging the potential for negative outcomes, it's also vital to remember that policymakers may be driven by different objectives, perhaps even sincerely held but, well, differing beliefs about the best path forward. Our source points to the range of views on protectionism within government. Some may genuinely believe in bolstering domestic production and safeguarding certain industries. Just as the early church grappled with diverse viewpoints, we see a similar dynamic in the realm of economic policy.
That's a helpful parallel.
So, while the results might be challenging, the initial motivations aren't always rooted in purely harmful intentions.
That resonates. It's not a monolithic perspective. And it's a reminder that the political landscape around trade has shifted over time. Our source notes that historically, the left often favored tariffs, while the right championed free markets, almost a mirror image of the present.
Precisely. This historical reversal underscores that economic policies, including those concerning trade, are often shaped by evolving priorities and political strategies, much like societal norms and understandings can change over generations. The reasons for supporting or opposing tariffs have transformed, reflecting shifting economic realities and political alignments.
Now, let's touch on the global stage. The idea of foreign policy being used to gain access to cheaper resources and labor, a significant point raised in our material.
Yeah.
How does this broader geopolitical strategy intertwine with the implementation of tariffs?
Well, if we connect this to the larger tapestry of international relations, it suggests that trade policies are not always solely driven by domestic economic considerations.
Okay, so more going on.
Right. They can also serve as instruments of foreign policy used to influence relationships between nations and secure access to vital resources or more cost-effective labor markets in other parts of the world. It's a complex interplay of economic and geopolitical interests.
So a multi-layered strategy at play. And who ultimately wields influence in the direction of these policies? Our source suggests the S&P 500 and large corporations as potentially key players in the long term. Why might that be the case?
What's noteworthy here is the significant economic influence these entities possess. The S&P 500 represents a substantial portion of the nation's wealth, and large corporations often have considerable resources and, frankly, lobbying capabilities.
True.
Their ability to adapt to or be negatively impacted by tariffs means they can exert pressure on policymakers to shape trade policies in their favor over time. Their interests and the overall performance of the stock market often become important factors in the durability of any given tariff system.
It becomes a kind of negotiation then between governmental objectives and corporate realities.
Sort of, yeah.
Our source even mentions a New York Times article about the Trump administration versus Apple as a vivid illustration of this ongoing dynamic.
That example powerfully illustrates the inherent tensions that can arise between a government's trade goals and the operational needs of multinational corporations that rely on intricate global supply chains.
Right, they need those factories.
Exactly. Each side possesses considerable leverage and distinct priorities, leading to continuous negotiations and potential policy adjustments.
And it's not just about tariffs, is it? Our source brings up antitrust efforts against companies like Meta and the surprising bipartisan support for curbing corporate power. How does this wider context of government-corporate relations relate to our discussion on tariffs?
Well, if we consider the broader landscape, it reveals a growing trend of reevaluating the balance of power between governments and large corporations. The cross-party support for antitrust actions suggests a rising concern about the potential for concentrated corporate power to negatively affect competition and the overall economy. Tariffs can be viewed as another tool, albeit a contentious one, that governments might employ to influence corporate behavior and potentially reshape global supply chains.
Interesting.
It speaks to the ongoing tension between centralized authority and dispersed power, a theme echoed throughout history, really.
So these are all interconnected pieces of a larger economic and societal puzzle. Now, let's bring it closer to home and consider the potential impacts on us individually. Our source highlights how tariffs could affect Apple's profitability due to their manufacturing in China, and consequently, the value of the S&P 500 and our investments. Can you break down that connection for us?
Certainly, Apple is a significant component of the S&P 500 index, a very big piece.
Okay.
If tariffs substantially increase their production costs, their profit margins could decrease. This could lead to a decline in their stock price, which, given their large weighting in the index, would exert downward pressure on the overall value of the S&P 500.
Ah, I see.
So for those of us whose investments are tied to this index, whether through retirement accounts or other investments, you could see a reduction in your portfolio values. It underscores the interconnectedness of global trade and our personal financial well-being.
It really drives home the complexity of these economic issues, these interwoven and sometimes conflicting interests. It's rarely a simple cause and effect scenario, is it?
Precisely. There are always multiple layers of intended and unintended consequences at play.
Yeah.
Our source points out an interesting detail. Even with proposed significant tariffs against China, key consumer goods like phones, laptops, and computer chips were notably excluded.
Oh, really?
Yes. This likely reflects intense lobbying from corporations and, well, a recognition of our reliance on these technologies in our daily lives.
A telling illustration of those competing forces at work. Now, we've mentioned the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average several times. For anyone listening who might not be entirely familiar, could you provide a brief explanation of what these market indices represent?
Certainly. Think of them as barometers for the stock market, maybe like a snapshot.
Okay.
The S&P 500 tracks the performance of 500 of the largest publicly traded companies in the United States, providing a broad overview of the large-cap market. It's weighted by market capitalization, meaning larger companies have a bigger influence.
Got it. And the Dow.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average focuses on just 30 prominent, well-established companies, offering another perspective on market performance. Both are widely used as benchmarks to assess the overall health and direction of the stock market.
Helpful to have that clarity. Now, if you find yourself wanting a deeper exploration into the mechanics of tariffs themselves, our source suggests tuning into the Planet Money podcast. What makes that a particularly good recommendation?
Planet Money has a well-earned reputation for taking complex economic topics and explaining them in a clear, engaging, and often entertaining way, avoiding overly technical jargon.
Yeah, they're great at that.
They have covered tariffs extensively and can provide a more detailed understanding of their operation and potential impacts in a format that is accessible to a broad audience. So definitely worth a listen if you want more detail.
Sounds like a valuable resource for those wanting to delve further. Okay, let's pivot slightly to the concept of recession. Our source touches on the inherent complexities in even defining and declaring a recession. It's more than just a few negative headlines, isn't it?
Indeed. It's quite technical, actually. Economists typically define a recession based on a confluence of factors, including sustained declines in gross domestic product, employment figures, industrial production, and retail sales over a period of time.
So multiple indicators need to align.
Exactly. And the official determination of a recession often comes after the fact, as it involves analyzing these key economic indicators related to consumer activity and purchasing patterns.
So the economic reality might shift before it's officially labeled. And our source makes a critical point that stock market performance is not a direct or sole indicator of a recession. Why is that important to understand?
Oh, very important. The stock market primarily reflects investor sentiment and expectations about the future profitability of companies.
Right. Forward-looking.
While it can sometimes anticipate economic downturns, it's not a foolproof predictor. The stock market can be influenced by a range of factors beyond the fundamental health of the overall economy, such as interest rate adjustments, geopolitical events, even just investor psychology. Therefore, a decline in the stock market doesn't automatically signify an impending recession, and conversely, a rising market doesn't guarantee economic prosperity for everyone.
That's a significant distinction. Our source also mentions millennial scarring associated with the term recession, stemming from their experiences during the Great Recession. It's a term that carries considerable emotional weight for that generation.
Absolutely. For many millennials who entered the workforce during or in the aftermath of the Great Recession, the term recession evokes memories of significant financial hardship, job losses, and a precarious economic environment.
Yeah, I remember that time well.
This formative experience has understandably led to heightened anxiety and sensitivity surrounding any discussions of potential economic downturns.
It's a poignant reminder that economic events have very real and lasting impacts on individual lives and perspectives. And as our source emphasizes, the feeling and impact of an economic downturn will vary significantly from person to person, regardless of official declarations. It's not a uniform experience.
Precisely. Someone with stable employment in a resilient sector might experience a period of economic slowdown with relatively minor personal impact,
Okay.
while another individual who loses their job or whose industry is severely affected will face a much more pronounced personal recession, irrespective of the broader macroeconomic statistics.
This leads to a compelling point in our source regarding the disconnect between positive economic indicators highlighted by a previous administration and the actual lived experiences of many people. It suggests this divergence may have even played a role in voter shifts.
What's revealing here is the potential disconnect between aggregate economic data, the big numbers, and the financial realities faced by many individuals on the ground.
Right.
While certain broad indicators like overall job growth or stock market performance might appear positive, they don't always reflect the challenges many people face due to factors such as rising living costs or stagnant wages.
Makes sense.
This disparity between the macro narrative and micro experiences can lead to disillusionment and influence political choices as people vote based on their lived realities.
It truly underscores that the stock market is not the economy, at least not in the way most individuals experience it day to day.
That's a key takeaway.
And as our source illustrates, a personal recession can occur even if the wider economy isn't officially in one. Using the examples of federal workers facing layoffs or industries heavily reliant on tariffed imports.
Exactly. The concept of a personal recession highlights the fact that economic hardship can be a very localized and individual experience. Changes within specific sectors, job losses in particular fields, or the direct consequences of policies like tariffs on certain industries can create significant financial difficulties for individuals and families, regardless of the overarching macroeconomic picture.
Now, when we discuss tariffs and economic downturns, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act during the Great Depression often comes to mind. Our source mentions the widespread consensus among economists that it actually exacerbated and prolonged the Depression. That's a sobering historical precedent.
It is indeed. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which significantly increased tariffs on a wide range of imported goods back then, is widely regarded by economists as a major policy misstep.
A misstep is putting it mildly, maybe.
Well, yeah. It triggered retaliatory tariffs from other nations, severely curtailed international trade, and deepened the economic contraction of the Great Depression. It serves as a stark historical warning about the potential damaging consequences of protectionist trade policies on a global scale.
However, our source also points out a somewhat paradoxical aspect of economic downturns. How those with capital can sometimes benefit if they maintain their investments. Can you explain that dynamic?
Sure. During economic downturns, asset prices, including stocks, often decline, sometimes sharply. Individuals who have the financial stability to hold on to their investments through these periods have the potential to see significant gains when the market eventually recovers. This is often referred to as riding out the storm.
Okay.
Additionally, those with available capital may have opportunities to purchase assets at lower prices during downturns, positioning themselves for future growth.
Which connects to the speculation our source mentions about potential market manipulation surrounding tariff announcements. The idea that some might strategically try to create market dips to buy assets at a lower price.
That's a concern that often surfaces during periods of market volatility. The suspicion is that individuals or entities with substantial financial resources might strategically act around significant policy announcements, like tariff implementations, to influence market prices in their favor. Potentially buying assets at a discount if the market reacts negatively to the news. It's hard to prove, but the suspicion exists.
So, with all these complex factors at play, the underlying advice seems to be to focus on what we can control, our own personal finances.
That's generally wise counsel, yes.
And that leads to the question many are likely contemplating. Should I consider buying the dip? Our source offers some fairly specific guidance on who this strategy might be appropriate for.
Yes, buying the dip essentially involves investing in the stock market after a decline in prices. Our source suggests this strategy is generally suitable for individuals who have a stable income, secure employment, and existing long-term retirement investments where they are already making consistent contributions.
Okay, so people already investing regularly.
Right. The rationale is that you are acquiring assets at a lower price, and over the long term, the market is expected to rebound. This aligns with the principle of dollar cost averaging, where you invest a fixed sum regularly, regardless of market fluctuations. You buy more shares when prices are low, fewer when they're high.
Conversely, when might it be wise to consider temporarily pausing those regular retirement contributions, even if it feels counterintuitive to long-term financial planning?
The primary consideration in such a scenario is job security and the need for readily accessible cash reserves, like an emergency fund.
Right, the safety net.
If you have genuine concerns about potential job loss and your regular retirement contributions constitute a significant portion of your monthly budget, it might be prudent to temporarily pause those contributions to build up your emergency savings.
Okay.
This provides a financial buffer to navigate potential unemployment. However, it's crucial to emphasize that as soon as your financial situation stabilizes, resuming those retirement contributions is essential for long-term financial security. Don't pause indefinitely.
That makes logical sense, prioritizing immediate needs during times of uncertainty. And our source briefly contrasts lump sum investing with the generally recommended strategy of consistent contributions. Why is the approach of consistent contributions typically favored for most individuals?
Well, consistent contributions or dollar cost averaging help to reduce the risk of attempting to perfectly time the market, which is, frankly, nearly impossible.
Yeah, good luck with that.
By investing a fixed amount at regular intervals, you purchase shares at various price points over time, effectively averaging out your purchase cost. Lump sum investing, on the other hand, involves investing a large sum of money all at once,
Right.
which exposes you to the risk of investing right before a market downturn. While lump sum investing can potentially lead to faster gains if the market rises immediately, it also carries a higher degree of risk for most people.
Now, for those who are already invested, the concept of reallocating portfolios comes up. What does that involve? And why might a financial advisor suggest it during market downturns?
Reallocating your portfolio involves adjusting the mix of assets you hold, typically stocks, bonds, maybe other things.
Okay, changing the balance.
Exactly. During a market downturn, when stock prices have fallen, a financial advisor might recommend rebalancing your portfolio. This could involve selling some of your relatively more stable assets, like bonds, which may not have fallen as much, and using those funds to purchase more stocks, essentially buying low with the expectation of future recovery. As our source mentioned, this is a strategy they discussed with their financial advisor, potentially shifting towards a higher allocation to equities when the market was down.
And a fundamental principle of any sound investment strategy, particularly in uncertain times, is diversification. Our source strongly emphasizes the importance of looking beyond just the U.S. market and including international markets in your portfolio. Why is this broader diversification so critical?
Diversification is just a cornerstone of risk management in investing. It's crucial.
Okay.
By spreading your investments across different asset classes like stocks and bonds in different geographical regions, US, Europe, Asia, emerging markets, you lessen the impact of any single market's poor performance on your overall portfolio.
So don't put all your eggs in one basket, essentially.
That's the classic analogy, yes. Investing in international markets can help to offset potential downturns in the U.S. market, as different economies and markets often don't move in perfect synchronization. It smooths out the ride, hopefully.
That makes perfect sense, not placing all your trust in one area, or in this case, one country's economic performance.
Yeah.
Finally, our source underscores the importance of contextualizing market drops and avoiding knee-jerk reactions to sensationalized news headlines. How can we cultivate that kind of measured perspective?
Developing a basic understanding of historical stock market data can be incredibly beneficial. Perspective is key.
Right.
A 2,000-point drop in the S&P 500 today might sound alarming, and the headlines will reflect that. But it's important to consider that the overall value of the index is significantly higher than it was in previous decades.
True. The percentage matters more.
Exactly. What might have been considered a massive swing in the past could be a relatively normal fluctuation in today's market context. By examining historical trends and understanding long-term market behavior, you can gain a more balanced perspective and avoid making impulsive decisions driven by fear-inducing headlines.
This has been incredibly insightful as we navigate these times. It's clear that understanding tariffs and their potential effects is a multifaceted issue with many interconnected elements. A lot to consider.